Hey guys, this is Blue Forest. So as you saw, I just did a thorough test of Sunstreaker's SIG against Chromia, and I used that lane in particular because it's an armor lane, and so that is actually Act 4, Chapter 3, I believe. Yes, it is Chapter 3, Mission 6 with the Tronus boss. There are a couple of armor lanes in the story, and Act 4, Chapter 3, Mission 6 is one of those, and it is really one of the only chances you have for genuinely long fights in the game. So if you're looking to test out some bots and you want some long fights, those armor lanes with the 90% armor are great because all of the fights will be over 100 hits as long as you're not using an armor breaker. You know, there are the adaptive lanes and the cycle resist lanes that make the fights longer as well, but those armor lanes are your best shot. And they're really the only option you have to practice because we don't have any, LOC type missions. And so I wanted to do a test of his SIG, but also offer some thoughts on playing him in general because I have gotten some questions about Sunny. And honestly, I only ranked him up because I wanted to use some bots that I did not use in the old game. And Sunny was one of the last bots that we got during the Kabam days. I didn't use him at all in the old game, so it was a bit of a gamble to use him, but I've been very happy with him. I totally maxed him out. He's a lot of fun to play. He serves me very well in AMs, and I really like him. And so in terms of his SIG, I did max it out, and I feel like it's very worth it too if you use him a lot. He ends up having about a 67% chance to gain a permanent melee or armor buff every time a buff on him expires. And if you've used Sunny at all, you'll know that he gets these melee and armor buffs over and over again, right? So Sunny is in two major states, 60+% health, he's in pristine state, and then 40% or lower, he's in blemish state, and then he has this sort of mid state between 40 and 60%. And so at the start of the fight, he gets his evasion and armor, and then when he drops to low health, he gets 17% melee damage, and he goes unstoppable. And so every time you use a special with Sunny, you're getting these buffs depending on which state you're in, right? So if you use any of his specials and you're at higher health and pristine state, like I was in this fight, right, he's going to get the blemish state buff, so he's going to get that extra melee buff and go unstoppable. If he's in blemish state, the last hit will be unblockable. And if he's in that sort of mid state between 40 and 60, he's going to get both state buffs. And if you use a special 3, which is a good one to use in very long fights, he gets both state buffs every time. And so you know that every time you use a special, you're going to be getting these buffs, and they always expire after 4 to 6 seconds. And so that means that every time they expire, you're going to have a chance to get one of these permanent melee or armor buffs. And at high SIG, it is about what it says. It's about a 2 in 3 chance, so more often than not, you will get the permanent buff. Now, here's the thing about Sunny. His SIG is partially broken, meaning that only the melee buffs work. The armor buffs do not apply. For whatever reason, you just don't get the permanent armor buffs. I would like to see that fixed. They have been fixing, issues with other bots, and by the way, they have done a few updates to individual bots with the most recent update a couple weeks ago, and I do plan on doing a video on that as well soon. But regardless, for now, the armor buff does not work. The good news is, though, the melee buff is great. You're going to want that more often than not anyway. And it does stack up to 10, right? So that means that if you get 10 of the melee buffs, you're going to have 100% additional melee damage. That's double the melee damage. And in this fight against Chromia, I found that it took just about 100 hits, or roughly 3 minutes, for me to stack up to 10 melee buffs. So that does mean that the fights need to be fairly long, but they don't need to be super long in order to stack up a lot of buffs with him, right? They don't need to be LOC 3 length fights where it's hundreds and hundreds of hits. So any reasonably long fight, 100 plus hits, you're going to have a good chance to get 10 of those buffs. And even in mid-length fights, 50, 60, 80 hits, the kind of fights that I'm doing in AMs right now, you can still stack up a bunch of those, and even if you get up to, 4 or 5 melee buffs, that's 50% extra damage. That's a lot. The other thing that I really like about this is that once you do stack 10 of those, you can really have more like 11 buffs going most of the time, because remember, he gets the additional melee buff. If he's in his pristine state or mid state, he's going to get that blemish state buff, which is an extra 17% every time he uses a special. And even though it'll expire, if you're doing a lot of specials, you'll be able to get that additional melee buff over and over again, which means that his melee damage in total could be more like 120%. And he also has a 30% chance to get a 14% melee buff with his heavy. So the point is you can be doing between 10 and 12 melee buffs once you stack them up. And so that will result in a ton of extra damage. And so I was pretty pleased, in this Chromia fight. It did not take as long as I thought that it would to stack up those buffs. I would like to see the armor buff fixed, obviously just because it should be fixed, but also because in really long fights, if we do get any sort of LOC type missions, you could theoretically stack up to 10 armor buffs, which would make him basically immune to damage. And even if you didn't, even if you got, say, 5 armor buffs, that is a significant advantage. It would make him incredibly tanky. And so even though the armor buff doesn't work now, though, the melee buffs are great and they're reliable if he's at least fairly high sig. At low sig, they won't trigger that often. You won't get too many of them. But if you get him up to fairly high sig, you're going to be able to get a lot of these buffs. And the reason why I say he has a very rhythmical playstyle is because the only thing that you really need to get the hang of with him is understanding which buffs he's going to get according to which state he's in. That takes a little bit of practice, but once you have the hang of it, you just get into a really nice rhythm with him, and he's very reliable that way. In addition to that, one thing that's really nice about him is that he does have a little bit of power flow because he gains 5% power with the last hit of a combo. And so I will often do full 5-hit combos instead of the heavy at the end of a combo if I'm near a bar of power, because it will usually push him up to a bar of power if I want to use a special. So I did that a lot in this fight against Chromia. I was using special ones most of the time just because I wanted to be able to stack those buffs up as much as possible. But that little bit of power gain is really nice. Now his Purify is not very reliable. It's a flat 20% chance to Purify with range shots, and you have to land the range shots. And even if you do, because it's RNG based, you often won't Purify. But it's there. It helps you out occasionally. And so the point is that, I've often told people that Sunny is a bit of a mix. He's kind of like a cross between Ironhide and Motormaster. He's got lots of melee and armor buffs and frequent unstoppable. Because remember, when he's in that pristine state, or if he gets both state buffs, he's going to go unstoppable for 5 seconds every time you use a special, so you can get that over and over again. And so he's not quite as tanky as Ironhide. He doesn't go unstoppable quite as often as Motormaster will, but he gets a lot of both of those, and he's really fun to play. In addition to being a Maximus bot, he has a really nice power gain synergy with Sideswipe, and he gets a melee buff with Jetfire, who just came out. He also has synergy with Jazz and Prowl. It's not listed here. But even though he doesn't have a whole lot of synergies, he does have some very useful ones. And so if you're looking for a brawler to use, if you're not going to do Ironhide or Thundercracker, or even if you have and you're looking for another brawler to rank up, I would highly recommend Sunny. He's very solid, his damage is good, he's tanky, and you can be aggressive with him because he has that protection with his evasion, which, by the way, is good. Since they fixed it, it obviously makes him extremely annoying to fight against, but his evasion does kick in, and even though it says that his evasion is 10% and then 30% against crits, it feels like it's more like a flat 30%. He evades relatively often, and he has that armor at high health as well, so you can afford to be aggressive with him. And as I'm sure you know, if you fought against him, he has ridiculous reach with that sword of his. It's really long. It's longer than it looks like it should be, and that can be really helpful as well. And the Unstoppable also can be helpful against evade bots. It can just kind of help to get you in trouble because he's going unstoppable very often. So like I said, I'm very happy with him. He's fun to use, and as you saw in this video, it doesn't actually take him that long to stack up a lot of melee buffs, and once they do fix the armor part of it, he's going to be able to get a lot of both of them, which will make him one of the kings of the game for long fights in particular. Obviously, we don't know if we're going to get any LOC type missions, but in higher level AMs where the fights are at least moderate length or somewhat long, Sunny is a very reliable and fun bot to use. So I will leave it there for now, guys. I hope this has been helpful, and we will be in touch again next time. Take care.